Redemption Loop. Written by Svein Otto Vesteng. Interlude. The first of the totem lords thought they would live forever. And who could blame them? Aging seemed to halt once a bond was made. Those bonded young age to about 26 then stopped. Their features only grew more mature and distinguished as the decades passed. Lifespans commonly stretched to nearly 2 or 3 centuries. Imagine the first totem lord's shock on his 232nd birthday. Waking to find his hair bone white. It was the first sign that their lives were, in truth, still short, still mortal. From the time their hair turned white, they had about a decade left, before even their Navari partners could no longer sustain them. Totem Lord Laorel wielded the power of intuitive engineering. If it could be imagined, he could find a way to create it. And what wonders he created! He was the architect of the dome, the creator of the android forges that built humanity's mechanical guardians, the mind behind the umbral pulse network, the heart that kept the lights on in a dying world. When he passed from this world, much of the knowledge needed to sustain his wonders passed with him. His Navari partner disappeared after his death, never bonding an heir. Now humanity does all it can to keep the machines running. Excerpt from the journals of historian Pikal of House Hall. Chapter 2. Girl with No Future. Miriam thought the Merc-Pulse sky looked particularly menacing that morning. Red cracks of lightning pulsed through the thick black mist rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Sometimes she swore she could see her grandmother's face flash in one of the pulses. That woman terrified her. Old, sure, but as a totem she still appeared in her early 30s, even well into her 90s. Even 30 seemed ancient to Miriam. It was more than double her age at 13. And sure, if the protective dome ever somehow spectacularly failed, the Merc-Pulse would spend mere minutes ending every life in the city. Still, Miriam was pretty sure that if old Granny Doriana really wanted to, she could cause at least half that damage herself before needing a well-deserved tea break. Naturally, the woman had standards. Miriam leaned against the balcony railing of her personal quarters, savoring the cool sting of the metal against her palms. The air system was just coming out of its nighttime cooling cycle. The warm breeze rising felt soothing on her face, like what she imagined sunlight on skin might feel like. All she had to go on were ancient pictures in her imagination. The real thing was forever hidden behind the choking Merc-Pulse outside. Just like any hope she had for an exciting future with meaning or purpose. Miriam sighed, forcing herself to think of something less self-pitying. The view from Lilar Spire was amazing, at least. Her gaze drifted over the rows of houses below, all proudly sharing the green, crimson, and orange colors of House Lilar. Her family. She was a Lilar, all right. Her long red hair and scheming green eyes proved that much. Now, if someone could just inform the rest of her family about it, maybe she'd have a chance. No. She missed that chance the day she slept through her very first birthday. Now Galen got to be the older brother forever thanks to a 7-minute technicality. All she'd ever wanted was to be a totem. To have an ethereal Navari partner of her own. But bonds like that were a matter of inheritance. Her brother would be receiving his bond at today's ceremony and starting at the totem school next semester. Leaving her all alone to do what? Become a politician like her dad? The thought made her roll her eyes and feign a loud snore. with 3 cousins ahead of her in the line of inheritance. Well, unless something catastrophic happened to all of them. Like, say, a section of the dome collapsing right on top of them during one of their "look how amazing I am" parties. That would be terrible, of course. Only truly awful people would ever find that funny. Miriam giggled. That was dark, even for her. She knew she shouldn't dwell on such thoughts. She even liked Zerora's, already a totem lord at 20, a true savant. As for Miriam, she considered herself more of a savant. She really had to stop using that joke. Last time she tried it in public, her mother had basically inhaled her tea. And she was not one of the totems who could breathe underwater. Politics were complicated. Well, she guessed most professions were complicated when you just sort of winged it. She knew she'd have to start taking things seriously eventually. Coming out here always helped put things into perspective. Every person had their place. That was the only reason anything still worked at all, even if that fact seemed rather boring. And on top of that, rather lame too. What good were traditions if they didn't serve you? Miriam heard the doors slide open inside her quarters, followed by the clanging, rhythmic footsteps of her attendant androids. Dutiful servants of her family jumping to their assigned tasks like they didn't even care they'd never been given the option to write their own programming. She clung tightly to the railing. There was no avoiding the inevitable. She resigned herself to her fate and heroically shuffled inside. With all the enthusiasm of a sack of potatoes, someone kept dropping.
"You look radiant this solar cycle, Miss Miriam."
She knew the automaton wasn't capable of sarcasm. She might have slapped it if it were. A lady must defend her honor. Her personal quarters were large, designed for more people, it felt like, almost lonely in their opulence. The metal walls were printed with a faux wooden finish, trying and failing to feel warm. Expensive furniture, some of it based on designs from the pre-Merc Pulse world, was arranged with clinical precision. It was the kind of room that looked perfect until you actually tried to live in it. The androids moved through the space like puppets built by engineers who'd only heard of humans secondhand. And honestly, humans were boring anyway. Their bodies were humanoid. If you ignored the joints that whirred faintly like oversized wind-up toys, draped in servant uniforms so crisply white they seemed to reject the very concept of dirt. But the faces, or the lack of them. Where skin should have been, glass screens stretched across smooth, featureless metal. Each screen glowed with the same looping animation, a handlebar-mustached gentleman in a cravat, smiling blankly like a corrupted Victorian portrait. It was like someone had fed an old painting through a broken printer and called it a day. Very human design indeed, she thought, biting back a laugh. Miriam clung to the last few seconds of rebellion, leaning against the doorway.
"Do me a favor,"
she said.
"Let's do this fast. The sooner we start, the sooner I can move on to more important things."
The lead android's pixelated face twitched its magnificent mustache, then answered.
"The need for efficiency is noted. I am failing to locate higher priority appointments on your schedule. Have I made an error? Please provide update."
Miriam closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. If she could build her own android, it would actually understand sarcasm. Maybe have a decent face too. But that dream was about as likely as her becoming a totem lord. The old android forge didn't even work anymore. Nobody seemed to know why. Wouldn't it be funny if it was just unplugged or something similarly stupid?
"No cogs for brains.
She said sweetly.
I do not literally have a more important place to be today."
Charming teenage banter detected. Schedule update cancelled.
The android pivoted stiffly on its faux heels, facing its 2 companions. A stream of atonal beeps blared from its speaker. And somehow this gibberish made perfect sense to them. Maybe that's what happened when your head was full of cogs instead of whatever kind of goop Miriam had stuffed into hers. The other two androids marched toward her wardrobe and began laying out an acceptable outfit for today's event. The big party to celebrate her brother Galen's big day, the binding ceremony. And it wasn't like her dad Fallon would ever miss an opportunity to brag about his awesome son. Mother always assured Miriam that he loved her too. But since he'd come from a family without a totem lineage, marrying into the Lilar name and producing a totem son was a very big deal. Miriam, she was more of a very big inconvenience to deal with. She planned to spend the party exactly the way she spent most parties, sitting in a corner, sharpening her sarcasm, and eventually exchanging fake pleasantries with distant relatives and social climbing suck-ups. She had more important things to do. When she got home, she would continue her latest project, an android. Well, technically an android. It didn't move. She had no idea how to make it move. Its body was cobbled together from cutlery and twine, and she was currently eyeing the tablecloth on her dresser as material for clothing. Mother might get mad at first, but in time she would grow to appreciate Miriam's art, if she ever found out, that is. Miriam wasn't planning to volunteer that particularly inconvenient information. At least her cousin Jantor always appreciated her ridiculous projects. Sometimes he even smuggled her scraps and parts, like a loyal supplier fueling her mad scientist dreams. Now, if only she could get her hands on an umbral blowtorch. Miriam's mad scientist dreams would have to wait, though. The androids had sprung into action. They descended on her like wind-up surgeons, movements precise and cold. One clamped her shoulders straight with clawed hands that pinched like crab pincers. Another yanked a brocade gown over her head, the fabric stiff and scratchy, smelling of lavender and something faintly metallic. A third attacked her hair, fingers snagging strands into a braid so tight her scalp burned. The final unit unleashed a portable steamer, methodically erasing every wrinkle with jets of vapor that smelled faintly of burnt lavender. With each burst, the animated mustache on its screen twitched upward in perfect synchronization, the pixels warping as if singed by the steam. Twitch hiss, twitch hiss. Miriam stared into the mirror, practicing expressions. Too much teeth. She looked rabid, pursed lips, a constipated empress. The lead android jerked her chin higher, its screen face twisted in a simulation of deep concentration. Then it stated with mechanical pride,
Posture corrected.
She settled on a closed-mouth smile, cheeks aching. A vacant doll-like expression that screamed, I'm thrilled to be here and I've never felt joy. The android grooming her hair inserted a pin with a snick, its voice box crackling.
Hair structure 98.6% optimal.
What's the 1.4%?
She muttered.
Defiant flyaways, irrelevant to aesthetic calculations.
It retreated abruptly, joints clicking, and tilted its screen head at a perfect 12-degree angle. The programmed approximation of admiration.
Truly, no celebratory gathering shall rival the radiance you emit this solar cycle.
Miriam cocked her hip, eyeing the android's quivering mustache.
Oh, I hope I'm not radiating whatever it is too badly. Explains why your stash is curling like overcooked bacon.
The unit froze. Its screen flickered blue, then reset with a blorp of static.
I apologize. Radiance is defined as light emission at 683 lumens per watt. My simile to metaphor recalibration was amusement optimized.
The mustache now drooped into a visible frown. Miriam pressed a hand to her heart, mock wounded.
And just like that, my wit flatlines. You get similes like a scholar, but humor evaporates in your presence like algebra to a goldfish. Tell me, When Laurel built your brain, did his instructions seriously forget the comedy chip?
Ah, a joke. Very amusing.
The android's head abruptly twisted backward with a mechanical whir, into a position that would have been a real pain in Miriam's neck, possibly a permanent one. It blared its machine language, a series of high and low tones at its mustached companions, then snapped its head back to face her. In unison, the androids delivered their version of a laugh. Rigid. Ha, ha, ha. Each syllable spaced like a metronome set way too slow, their mustaches jerking upward in stiff mechanical twitches. It sounded less like amusement and more like a rusted music box trying to swallow a cough. Against her better judgment, Miriam had to give them credit for the effort. She offered a small, reluctant clap. Their mustaches twitched in what she assumed was gratitude. Bowing stiffly, the lead android asked,
Do you require any further assistance?
Miriam raised an eyebrow.
Could you perhaps make the weather system glitch out or something? Maybe get the snoring ceremony canceled?
The android responded with another rigid, ha, 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 completely ignoring her very reasonable request. Some bad weather would at least make things interesting. The androids finished their tasks and made their way out of her room. She heard a startled noise in the hallway.
Whoa!
One of the androids had apparently spooked Galen. Her brother was dressed in his fine ceremonial robes, his hair defying gravity. Probably more wax than human at this point. Miriam thought it looked like a helmet. As the android apologized profusely for startling the young master, Miriam was in serious distress, trying not to laugh out loud. Though she fought valiantly, she lost the battle. She burst out laughing, clutching her sides as the giggles tore free.
Hey, that's not nice!
Galen called, which somehow made it even funnier. She was crying now, gasping for breath, the absurdity of the moment overwhelming her. Galen's annoyed expression melted away, and then he too lost the battle. Soon both of them were doubled over, madly cackling in the hallway like fools, truly living up to the royalty of their blood. Trying to regain his composure, Galen motioned for her to stop.
Miriam,
More laughter.
seriously, the capsule car! It's here, waiting for us!
Boring. She guessed there was no avoiding this. Or was there? Miriam smiled sheepishly.
Race you.
Galen, who considered himself very mature for his age, looked at her like she'd just sliced into his birthday cake before the candles were even out.
Miriam, can't you just...
But Miriam was not above cheating. She bolted down the hallway, leaving only an annoyed grunt behind her as Galen spent just a little too long deciding whether or not to chase her. Giving her a serious head start, her footsteps echoed off the mirror-polished metal floors printed with a faux granite pattern designed to look more dignified than it felt. The walls were lined with detailed oil paintings chronicling the great deeds of her family. All of them totem lords, of course. Hard for a non-totem to compete when even smelling a bit of the merc pulse was a death sentence. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her as she sprinted down the hall, silently disapproving. As if she were a wild animal loose in their pristine ancestral temple. Miriam grinned harder and ran faster, like the last pastry in the kitchens was about to vanish without her getting one. The transport waited at the Lilar Spire's platform. A pearlescent capsule car, its curved hull reflecting the jagged silhouettes like a polished fingernail. The cockpit, barely large enough for two, offered seats upholstered in cold, iridescent leather. Miriam straightened her dress. Even though the androids had styled her outfit with mathematical precision, and it was still not immune to the laws of physics. As the door hissed open at her approach, she caught the slap-slap of hurried footsteps echoing down the platform. Galen, he was sprinting, ceremonial robes flapping like panicked bird wings, and face flushed from the effort.
Miriam, wait!
She jabbed the door control. The capsule sealed with a firm thunk, cutting off his voice into muffled protests behind the hull.
Take me to Lar Castle.
she said sharper than she meant to.
Departure command to Lar Castle. Confirmed.
The capsule's interface droned. The railcar shuddered slightly, then began to glide forward with smooth precision, the platform slipping away behind her. Along with Galen's waving arms and that ever-persistent need to be seen. This wasn't running away. She just didn't want to share a transport with him. Not tonight. Not when she'd be hearing about him for the next 6 hours. Galen this, Galen that. His profound maturity as the older sibling. His noble humility. His natural gift for bonding. Let them toast him. For now, the capsule's quiet was hers. No radiant brother. No ceremonial noise. Just the low hum of the rails. And the faint aftertaste of guilt curling at the back of her throat.
He'll survive,
She said, leaning back. Probably. This ride would take almost 30 minutes, so rather than staring mindlessly out the window and risking the trap of thinking, Miriam decided to stare mindlessly at the capsule's display screen instead. Better to be numbed by the latest news than get distracted by internal chatter. She might even pick up some topics of conversation if she needed them.
Turn on the display.
Miriam ordered. The car speaker chimed obediently and the screen flickered to life. The female information disclosure appeared, flawlessly styled, of course. Wearing a tight-fitting gray dress uniform embroidered with the crest of House Siphon, Figures, one of the lesser houses desperately inflating their influence by stamping their symbols all over the broadcasts. Sure, they had totems, but not even one totem lord to their name. Miriam was still recovering from the ball last month, where one of them, a boy her age, had kept bugging her, trying to befriend her, probably on strict family orders, hoping to orchestrate some future marriage alliance. The boy had been nice enough, just awkward, and more importantly, completely incapable of speaking even one of his true thoughts. Miriam was fairly certain she had a sixth sense for insincerity. Practice, after all, made perfect. As she watched, the woman on the screen projected that familiar, carefully honed brand of false enthusiasm Miriam knew far too well.
Citizens of Merkdeep and its affiliated crystal mines rejoiced today as Section G of Worksite SK-47 was officially opened,
The woman announced. Behind her, a group of miners clapped with just enough energy to pass for joy. A Lilar representative led the ceremony. Smiling, polished, perfectly rehearsed. Miriam almost smiled herself. Difficult life. Manufactured pride, staged happiness. She'd seen this performance before. In ballrooms, at galas, at family dinners, and it was all the same dance. She might have kept watching, analyzing every artificial pause and smile. If the world hadn't decided to tear itself apart outside her window. A sudden blast ripped through the air. The rail beneath the capsule shuddered violently. A shockwave slamming into the car hard enough to rattle her teeth.
Emergency flight capability activated,
Announced the car's speaker systems, its calm tone completely at odds with the rising wail of alarms. Miriam's heart slammed against her ribs. Her breath came sharp and shallow.
What's happening?
Twisting in her seat, she strained to peer through the rear window. Heat radiating from the explosion in the distance, a towering column of black smoke coiling upward from the Lilar storage facility.
please fasten seat belts.
The automated voice added helpfully. Of course, frustration gnawed at her. The helpless kind that came from being this close to danger but utterly unable to do anything about it. But instinct told her not to be stupid. She buckled herself in, the seatbelt biting into her shoulder as it clicked into place. Her gaze never leaving the rising smoke. The car detached from the rail with a bone-jarring jolt, slamming her back against the seat. The Umbral engines kicked in. Their deep, resonant hum filling the cabin, tinged with the sharp tang of ozone and heated metal. The craft lurched skyward, complaining loudly, not so much flying as dragging itself upward in stubborn defiance of gravity. It pitched and rolled, fighting for balance like a ship caught in a storm surge. The emergency flight capability was old, and it groaned hard, like an ancient creature that very much did not want to get out of bed. Miriam clenched the armrest hard enough to ache, her nails biting into the cold upholstery. The harrowing flight finally came to an end. Miriam's capsule car slammed down onto the rooftop platform of Lar Castle. The impact jolted through her. Rattling up the metal frame, slamming into her bones, she caught herself against the doorframe, the acrid smell of scorched machinery clinging to the air like a second skin. When she climbed out, a wave of relief washed over her. Sharp and fleeting, but real, Lar Castle loomed before her. An imposing fortress of steel and stone built more to terrify than to impress. The rooftop platform stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction, a vast landing zone designed to accommodate entire squadrons if needed. Struts of dark metal curved elegantly from the center, forming a skeletal web beneath the reinforced surface. Soaring parapets rose along the edges, each carved with swirling engravings that immortalized the most self-congratulatory deeds of the Lilar family line. Arc-shaped pillars etched with geometric precision framed the grand entranceway. A faint hum of umbral energy coursed through the structure's veins, visible in the subtle glow pulsing along the ornamental metalwork. Of course it glows, Miriam thought dryly. Heaven forbid anything in this family didn't sparkle. High above the rooftops of the city, wind whipped across the landing zone, carrying with it the distant clamor of alarms. Engines roared behind her. Turning, Miriam caught sight of two more capsule cars descending from the bruised sky. Their burning thrusters screaming like wounded dragons closing in. The first car came down with no more grace than her own. Engines grinding and howling before finally skidding into a shuddering halt. The jarring contact kicked up dust and loose gravel, rattling her already frayed nerves. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a thoroughly disheveled Galen. Robes tangled, hair wild, his expression definitely not befitting a future totem lord. The second capsule sputtered and groaned overhead. Its engines shrieked, metal warping under stress, coughing like a dying animal. Miriam's stomach lurched.
It's not going to make it.
She breathed. She could see it. The faltering angle, the uneven pitch, the desperate way it tilted against the wind. It wasn't descending anymore, it was falling. A sudden, ear-splitting crash of shattering glass tore through the scene. From within the crippled car, someone launched themselves outward, hurling free with inhuman strength. The force of their leap sent the spiraling wreck spinning wildly off course. Swathed in a flowing green gown, red hair whipping behind her like a war banner, the figure glided through the air and landed on the platform with disconcerting ease. An uncanny grace that made a mockery of physics. No sooner had her boots touched the ground than a resounding boom shook the platform, the out-of-control car slamming into the structure below. When the dust settled, Lazulia stood upright, a striking predatory silhouette against the smoldering wreckage. Lazulia Lilar, 15 years old, totem-bonded, family prodigy. At her waist hung her totem mask, ornate, wicked-looking, its edges jagged like it had been pieced together from a cluster of knives.
That was awesome!
Galen crowed, scrambling out of his own battered vehicle, with all the grace of a toddler escaping bath time. Lazulia didn't so much as flinch at the praise. She regarded them both with piercing green eyes, the faint glow of her totem bond pulsing beneath her gaze, like some quietly ticking clock.
We should head inside,
she said coolly, casting a wary glance skyward.
there might be more incoming.
As they moved toward the elevator, they passed a unit of labor androids. Towering gorilla-like silhouettes of sleek metal plating and heavy jointed limbs. The blue glow of their visors swept across the wreckage, systematically scanning for signs of damage. Their bulky torsos hummed with the muted whir of servo motors, each android moving as if molded from the same massive frame. Light glinted off the reinforced plating at their knuckles and shoulders. Old scuffs and scratches catching the glow. The marks of decades spent performing back-breaking tasks no human could endure. Their measured steps echoed across the platform. A synchronized march of unstoppable machines built for immense labor and unshakable endurance. Lazulia's posture was sharp as glass.
How dare they!
She hissed between clenched teeth.
Filthy terrorist scum!
What happened? Who did this?
Galen asked, glancing around nervously.
Sarduk terrorists.
Miriam supplied, her tone dry. Lazulia's silence confirmed it more than words ever could. She jabbed the elevator call button. Hard enough to leave a mark. Behind them, the androids were already clearing the wreckage, dismantling what was left of the demolished cars with terrifying, methodical efficiency. No hesitation, no mourning, just another problem to clean up. The elevator ride down was tense. Even Galen knew better than to try cutting through the menacing aura Lazulia was radiating. She looked ready to tear someone's head off. And neither Miriam nor Galen felt like volunteering, so they stood in silence. The only sounds were the faint hum of the elevator cables and the slow, rhythmic click of Lazulia's nails against her totem mask. Like she was counting down the seconds until someone made a mistake big enough to regret. Mercifully, the elevator chimed.
Destination reached.
Lazulia swept out without a word, heels striking the floor like hammer blows, storming down the hallway toward the main hall. Miriam and Galen didn't need to coordinate. They instinctively slowed their pace, letting distance grow between them and the walking disaster zone. After a few moments, Galen whispered, glancing around nervously.
They really got a bomb into the heart dome? Don't they know if the dome falls, it's the end of all of us?
His worry was raw, genuine, the kind that didn't fake itself. Miriam exhaled slowly through her nose.
It's not like I know how people like that think,
she said.
We're all trying to build a future here, but some people just get greedy.
Galen frowned.
If they want what we have, how does it make any sense planting a bomb in the storage facilities? That's where all the stuff they want is.
Miriam sighed. Typical Galen, like an old android. Rattling off nonsense most of the time, but every now and then managing to blurt out a working thought.
I did say I don't get people like that, Galen.
She muttered, more annoyed than she probably needed to be.
Maybe you can't afford not understanding people like that,
Galen said, glancing at her sidelong.
Things are really getting serious, Miriam. You need to take this seriously.
Miriam was annoyed. She considered tossing him a half-hearted, okay, whatever, just to shut him up. But then he had to ruin it.
At least I'm going to be a totem now.
Galen added, puffing up a little.
Probably a lord too, in no time. I guess I'll protect you.
He grinned.
You gotta pay me, though.
Miriam scoffed.
Grandfather practically makes money. What good would more of it do you?
You can pay me in cookies, then.
She scowled.
You know perfectly well I don't cook.
Maybe you should learn.
Galen shrugged like it was the most obvious solution in the world.
Think about it, sis. We're both at the cusp of adulthood. I know what I'll be doing, but you need to learn some, practical skills.
Miriam threw up her hands.
The androids do the freaking cooking, Galen.
Then do something. I don't know, just figure it out. Or you'll be bored out of your mind.
He paused, grin widening.
Well, if you're lucky, maybe our cousins Zeroras, Jantor, and Haldana will sniff out another of those bombs. And then you'll get to be a totem too.
Miriam stopped walking, shocked. It was different when she made those kinds of jokes. Hearing it from him felt like someone had tossed a cold stone down her back. She punched him hard in the arm, and he just laughed. They stepped into the grand castle hall, its soaring vaulted ceiling adorned with elaborate tapestries and rows of lit chandeliers that cast a soft, wavering glow across the marble floors. The room was dressed for Galen's lavish binding ceremony. Gold-embroidered banners draped from towering columns. Arrangements of flowers stood in crystal vases like fragile offerings to a future that didn't feel guaranteed. A large crowd had gathered, family members and assorted guests dressed in their finery, their voices blending into a low rumble of apprehension. Nervous tension clung to the air, vibrating in every hurried whisper and anxious sideways glance. Lazulia was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, sharp and still like a blade waiting for an excuse. The way she was staring at her and Galen made Miriam's stomach drop straight through the floor. Had she heard Galen's stupid joke? Lazulia's Navari partner was an assassin, one of the deadliest ever bound to a totem. It enhanced all of Lazulia's skills related to that particular profession. Did that include hearing? Miriam didn't know. She really didn't want to find out.
Father!
Galen called out, and then Miriam spotted him. Fallen Lilar, a man in his early 40s, all handsome, chiseled features, dressed in the crimson and green of his adopted house Lilar, like the colors had always belonged to him. He stood near the front of the crowd, composed as ever. The kind of man who could probably sip tea through an earthquake. He gestured for them to join him at the side.
"It's good to see you unharmed, children,"
Fallen said, voice smooth enough to have been sanded down by generations of politicians.
"Doriana is behind the stage, speaking to the constables. She'll be making an announcement soon."
Okay.
Galen said, clearly hesitating.
I don't mean to sound selfish, Father, but what about my...
"Of course, we are still doing the binding ceremony, son.
Fallen cut him off with a small, reassuring nod.
But it seems the after-party might be somewhat shortened, considering the circumstances."
Miriam raised an eyebrow, somewhat shortened, like calling a bomb detonation an unexpected minor inconvenience. There it was, the Lilar family motto, keep smiling, pretend nothing's on fire. The crowd fell silent, the sharp hush of people who knew better than to speak. Deliberate footsteps echoed from the stage. Miriam turned, and there she was, her grandmother Doriana Lilar stepping onto the stage with all the quiet weight of a storm rolling in. Unlike the party guests, all trussed up in their finest suits and gowns, Doriana was dressed for war. Her outfit was form-fitting, built for movement, deep green with red vines embroidered in intricate twisting patterns. Her long red hair was tied into a practical top knot, every strand in place like it had better be. Slung against one shoulder, her totem mask rested on a reinforced pad, its surface an organic bark-like texture shaped into the suggestion of a face, not carved, not manufactured, grown.
As I'm sure all you pampered fools have heard by now.
Doriana began, her voice slicing through the silence like a drawn blade.
The scumbag Sarduk terrorists have stepped up their game and attacked us in our very home.
No preamble, no comfort. Just the ugly truth spit straight into their polished faces.
There is no reported damage to the dome itself, so you can stop wetting yourselves over that. But 2 storage silos are currently on fire. This includes the grain silo.
She paused, just long enough for the privileged stomachs in the room to clench.
So some of you might lose a little weight for once, since there will be fewer pastries while we recover our losses.
Her voice hardened, stone upon stone.
Up to this point,
Doriana continued.
we have been too soft in our approach.
And then the words that turned Miriam's blood cold.
And that very weakness has today cost us one of our own. Totem heir Jantor was caught in the blast.
A breath.
He's presumed dead.
Jantor, dead. Miriam felt unsteady on her feet, like she'd spoken this evil into the world herself, like thinking dark thoughts had consequences. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating, grim. The crowd hung on every word. No one dared to interrupt her.
This is war. Do you understand that now?
Doriana's eyes swept across the room like knives.
Thankfully, no other people of quality lost their lives, only replaceable workers.
Cold, measured, dismissive.
Apart from one mechanical android, and there are precious few left. Without them, no one can maintain their kind.
Miriam's stomach twisted.
We have good reason to believe their main base of operations is somewhere near Merc Deep, our primary supply of umbral crystals.
A beat of silence, weight settling in like stone slabs.
And it's time to take off the silk gloves.
The words dropped like a hammer.
I am sending one of my totem lords.
She turned her head slightly, but like a general acknowledging a trusted weapon.
Zerores. Step up, grandson. It's finally time for you to prove yourself on a real mission.
From the side of the stage, Totem Lord Zerores Lee Lar stepped forward. He was handsome, annoyingly so, dressed in a practical suit marked with the symbols of their house. His totem mask, crystal, grown into a sharp, menacing formation, hung from his belt like a warning, controlled, composed. If he was grieving for the brother he just lost, it didn't show. A man carved into the shape of duty. Miriam remembered him differently. Once he'd been the kind boy who played with her and Galen in the garden, who let them win races, who laughed too loudly at their stupid jokes. But that was before he became a totem, before he earned the title of Totem Lord. Now, he didn't laugh at anything anymore. And Miriam wondered, heart twisting, would that happen to Galen too?
By the Totemic Founding Compact?
Doriana declared, her voice carrying across the hushed hall like the strike of iron on stone.
I grant you the use of any means you see fit to complete your mission.
The bloodthirst was unmistakable, sharp and eager beneath the ritual words. For a fraction of a second, she let it show. Then, like catching herself mid-lunge, she added with cool precision,
To keep us all safe. For now, there is no immediate danger.
She continued, already turning away.
Proceed with the binding ceremony.
Doriana walked off the stage, Zerores following without hesitation. Miriam cringed. For the first time in her life. She was relieved she wouldn't become a totem. Growing up, every story painted them as heroes. Larger than life, brave, noble, untouchable. But violence, real violence, didn't look like it did in the stories. It wasn't bad things happening somewhere else. It was here. It was now. And maybe it wasn't the bond that changed a person. Maybe it was the job. She reached out, tugging at Galen's collar.
Don't do it.
Galen turned, concern flickering across his face at her tone.
Don't get the bond. They'll send you into danger. I don't want anyone else to die.
Then, infuriating as always, he contorted his expression into that mocking grin of his.
Want to be a totem that bad, huh? Man, that's dirty, guilting a guy right at the cusp of power.
Miriam stared at him. She couldn't believe him. But before she could muster the strength to punch him, he pulled her into a hug.
Don't worry, sis.
He whispered in that infuriating, honest way of his.
I'll keep everyone safe.
Then he let go, walking off toward the stage to prepare for the ceremony, leaving Miriam standing there, numb. Everyone had their place, and that was a terrible thing.